To everyone. We at Advaita Academy welcome you all to this 1 month long Oneness Festival, a global celebration of Adi Shankaracharya ji. In this session, we have a live talk by Cleary ji, Jananiji, who will speak to us on discovering Vedanta's relevance in today's world, followed by a Q&A. After that, we have a video on Gayana Vyakhyana on Shivananda Lahari by Professor K.S. Kananji and Dr. Meeraji. For the new attendees, we have 4 different sessions every day, 2 in the morning at 6 a.m. IST and 2 in the evening at 6:30 p.m. IST. We also have extra music sessions every weekend, so please join us for all the sessions. Jananiji has been a yoga practitioner and trainer since 1974 at the Integral Yoga Institute in New York City. In 1978, she received full certification for completing Vedanta and Sanskritam studies at Sandipani Sadhanalaya, Mumbai, where she studied with Sadguru Swami Chinmayananda Saraswati ji and Puja Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji. She also audited Sanskritam classes at UPenn under Dr. George Cardona ji. Jananiji was directly involved in the founding of Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, Sailorsburg, Pennsylvania in 1985. And she continues to support its activities. Jananiji also teaches, gives talks, presentations, and workshops on various topics such as what is yoga, the meaning of karma, all about Shankara, and crisis management, to name a few. Please type questions and comments in the chat box below, and Jananiji will take it up right after her talk. We now welcome Jananiji to please start her talk. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.
Shri Guru Bhyo. Thank you. And I'll start with a quick chant that, of course, addresses the whole idea of undertaking this this view, looking at all of this. It goes, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. For those of you who are not familiar with what that means, it's basically asking for, as we sit together and go through this topic, that we are both clear, that we are intent upon what we are doing, and that ultimately what we take away from it is something that works for all of us. It's not something that you want to sit and just talk about. It's something from which everybody should benefit. So with that being said, the next piece is to just thank the Advaita Academy for hosting me. I am honored and blessed to be here. And they have also asked me to give a presentation on first talking about how I got involved with all of this. And that is something which, of course, can be beneficial without being, I don't want to go on and on and on. There's a lot of stories, of course, but basically just to provide some background because of the fact that I am coming from a different orientation and perspective. So with that, I'll begin. And it goes back to when I was growing up. I was growing up in Pittsburgh. I was born in a middle-class family living in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. My father was an engineer. He worked on the design of the first nuclear-powered sub. And my mother was, of course, a housewife taking care of children. And they were very dedicated. They were wonderful parents. But for the way they were, I wouldn't be the way I am. So if you know me at all, then you know my parents as well. And the way in which they brought me up was one in which you didn't necessarily just accept everything. My father always used to say that we should question until we're convinced about something, whatever it is that we're trying to understand. So because he was like that, he instilled in me that type of a pursuit or approach to all of this. And so as I grew older, naturally I was doing everything that everybody else was doing at the time. I had, of course, no inclination, ambition, awareness of doing anything related to this. I didn't even really have any spiritual orientation. I was just, growing up, and I had plans to go to college and get into social work. That was my game plan. But as the saying goes, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And for me, that was definitely the case, because round about high school, I began to sort of question things. I was finding that no matter what I got into, it wasn't all that interesting. I'd do it for a while and then find that somehow or other, it seemed to miss. And then somebody else would say, well, come along, try this, try that. So I did a number of different things. And each time I always felt like there was something missing. And at that time too, there was an orientation towards New Age. That was the beginning of the whole New Age thing, greater awareness. And yoga was just coming into vogue at that time. So when I was a junior in high school, I became a vegetarian, because that was something that was, a fad, I would say. Although I did take a lot of digs for eating yogurt, which everybody thought was ridiculous at the time. Of course, now it's, it's like, what? But in any case, that's how it was then. So anything that was along these lines was looked down upon. And therefore, I was sort of becoming more distanced from high school activities. And by the time I was a senior, I was doing yoga. So I got into yoga as part of this whole thing. And with that, there was what I would call a trigger. So in terms of how we're looking at all of this now, we're looking at, why is Shankara relevant? So relevancy is key. We want to see, how does Shankara connect to everything else? And with that, you also have this thing of, if it's not just has to be relevant, it also has to resonate. So if it doesn't resonate, it's not going to catch your attention. You're not going to be interested in it. And along with that, you have also what are known as triggers, I would say, that catch your attention and make you kind of shift. Well, again, at that time, I had not heard of Shankara. That was not what was on my mind in the least. But I did have what are events that were relevant, because this was the shifting time. So yoga was one of those events. And of course, the more I did it, it resonated for me. So I realized that I really wanted to know way more about this than I already knew. So I continued in that direction. And I also, at the time, there were triggers. Those triggers were things like the music. The music at that time, and even now, of course, you still hear it, but there were certain songs that kind of woke me up. One of them was the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, who, the theme was, you can't get no satisfaction. So that was just a repetition. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it was a song in which it played over and over that there was no satisfaction in anything. And so that kind of stuck with me. And along with that was another song by the Allman Brothers that had to do with wasting time, that everybody was sitting around just enjoying things, but it was a waste of time, and that they needed to really get up, look around, and get on with life, and not become complacent and indifferent. So that was another trigger for me. And then there was Cat Stevens, who questioned everything. And for whatever he is today, he is certainly foremost in terms of causing these kinds of shifts, because he was questioning the whole setup. One of the lines was, what's my sex, what's my name, all in all, it's all the same. Everybody plays a different game. That is all. And so that got my attention. And then there was Jethro Tull. And in Jethro Tull's music, there was a song that said something of, I'm sitting in the corner feeling glad, got no money coming in, but I can't feel bad. That was the best cup of coffee that I ever had. And I will not worry about a thing, because I've got it made here on the inside. So that got me thinking, what's the inside? Where is that? What is that? What does he mean by that? And then you had someone like Joni Mitchell. Now we all just go round and round and round, a song called The Circle Game. So that song was another one. You just, captive on a carousel. of time. We can't return. We can only look behind from where we came and go round and round and round in the circle game. So that was another one. So these were all triggers, and coupled with being, shifting my lifestyle and also practicing yoga, that really made me sort of sit back and say, or sit up and take notice, take a step back and say, okay, where do I want to go from here? And at that point, I realized I did not want to go to college, because I just saw that it was going to be more of the same as study in high school and so on. And that this really got my attention. So that's when I did go off to New York City. And because at the time, yoga studios weren't on every corner. And I went around and I found the Integral Yoga Institute, and I became a yoga teacher. And I had a good thing going up there on West 84th and West End Avenue. It was great, set up with classes and people responding. And, it made you feel good. It gave you a peace of mind. But then as I was, humming along, minding my own business, so to speak, Swami Chinmayananda showed up in New York. And I went to hear him by happenstance. I wasn't planning on it. And of course, he got my attention. If anybody is familiar with Swami Chinmayananda, you can't not be, made aware of his presence. And of course, more importantly, what he had to say. So, and in meeting him, he made me patently aware that I absolutely knew nothing. And that if I was going to, really teach yoga well, then I had to study. I had to know more than what I knew now. So that was like, okay, I really don't know if I want to do any more with this, but, and he kept making it, abundantly clear that if I didn't, then I really wouldn't be a good teacher. So that got my attention again. And with that, I decided to go and study in India. And when I went to India, of course, I didn't know Swami Dayananda at the time. Swami Chinmayananda was my conduit to go to India. And I wasn't so sure that I really wanted to study that much. I was more keen on just kind of floating through it, picking up tidbits and then heading back. And then I met Swami Dayananda. And he, of course, gave me a run for my money, so to speak, because he made it also abundantly clear that I knew absolutely nothing. And that if I was really going to be effective, I had to not only study, but I also had to give up a lot of preconceived notions. And he kind of gave me a hard time about that, because he said, I'm going to remove all those. And if you can't hack it, then you're wasting your time being here. And I thought, well, I came all this way. This was a lot of work getting here. And if I'm going to study and you're going to teach, then whatever you teach me better be better than what I know already. What you're taking away, it better be better than that. And when I said that, he just kind of laughed and he said, don't worry, it'll be fine. And of course, it was perfectly fine. So that was, again, a turning point for me to really knuckle down, get serious, and start to study. And that's what I did at this course in India for almost 3 years. And, in that, there was all of this. When you take a step back and you look at it, you realize it's like, but for the way my parents were, but for, the fact that I started yoga, but for the fact that I went to New York City, then I met Swami Chinmayananda, and then ultimately Dayananda, that, of course, none of it would have happened. This is life. This is the flow. But in that, you recognize that everything is connected to everything else. And each thing is something that has been a blessing. And I wouldn't take away from any of it or take away from anyone, because everything really helped me. And of course, kept me going on this kind of a track. So I get to India, I study, and there I am studying. And of course, Shankara, naturally, what it's all about, what Shankara, how he presented all of this. And I consider it, even now, my mind is totally boggled by the fact that this Vedic culture has been around for so long, and that for the longest time it was just handed down orally. And this tradition of handing down from one generation to the next, and then ultimately, of course, they put it to paper, but yet still it was consistent. There was this interesting little footnote about how in the early 1800s, when the British were going around and picking up all these texts and trying to understand exactly what everybody was looking at and what they were following, they found that all over India, the text was the same. And that is like, how did they do that? Because they had no communications like we have communications today. And yet they managed to maintain these texts in this tradition. And in this tradition, of course, you have Vedanta. And Vedanta is what I'm going to talk a little bit about, how that is, relevant, how it resonates, and what are some of the triggers that can help get people's attention. So, Shankara, in that respect, is the one who really brought this tradition alive again, because at some point it was faltering and people had no understanding of what it was all about. So Shankara came along and pretty much resurrected it. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. But yet at the same time, what he resurrected in terms of the Vedantic texts is something that somebody could say, well, that was what? That was around 850 or so. What was that, 1200 years ago? What does that have to do with now? What does it do for me? It's like, okay, that's nice. It's pretty impressive, but how does that help me? How does this really, work for me sitting here? Because, if you're sitting in India, you have at least the exposure through growing up in this tradition. But I'm coming from a completely different tradition. I have a wonderful tradition, by the way. Sometimes I think I'm a hybrid, because I don't dismiss what it is that I was given as a child. But yet at the same time, this tradition, hands down, takes it all the way and makes everything unmistakably clear. And in the process, of course, you gain everything, you lose nothing. Like the expression that says, the gain of the infinite is an infinite gain, and the loss of the infinite is an infinite loss. And so that's exactly why it's relevant. Because what is the topic? The pursuit of what is infinite. So we are in search of something that is lasting. Always we are in search of something that is lasting. And yet at the same time, when you look at everyday life, guess what? None of it is lasting. It's all changing constantly. So, and you can't stop the change. And what changes is something which you can't even get a grip on it, because time does that. Time causes all these changes. So here you are trying to embrace something that at least has some consistency and lasts for, beyond a certain time, that it's not time affected. Yet everything, when you do that analysis and the drill down, what do you find? It's all changing. And therefore every effort that you make, because that's changing, and of course, because the efforts that you make begin in time, they go in time. The results that you have also begin in time, and they go in time. And so if you're looking for lasting in this changing world, and of course the big paradox too is the only constant is change. So, what do? You just want to throw up your hands and walk away if you really think about it. And you don't, if you don't know there's a solution. Well, this is where, again, this whole tradition comes in. And of course, because of Shankara, this tradition is alive and well, and it presents, it not only raises this, this challenge, makes anybody who's paying attention aware that, we are all challenged this way. It is what we call the fundamental problem. So this fundamental problem that is there is something that, you know, is, if it was just my problem, then it would just be my problem. But it's also universal. Everybody has this problem. And it's something that you didn't go looking for. You didn't wake up one fine morning and decide, you know, gee, I think it's time to start looking for infinite or something lasting. This has always been part of anybody's pursuit. They want a lasting sense of satisfaction. They want to defy Mick Jagger and he can't get no satisfaction. Where is the satisfaction? And is it possible to be achieved even? So even that comes up because you don't just say it. You also have to establish how it is, what it is, and how it is accomplished. And so with that, you know, the relevance is very much there because everybody seeks something that is going to last. Not only they seek what is going to last, they want to feel that they have with that a sense, an abiding sense of well-being. So there are what I would call, you know, trigger verses, you know, that make this, it's not only relevant, it resonates. So some of those trigger verses are verses like in Mundaka Upanishad, where in the third verse, I believe it is, where he says, a student approaches a teacher and he asks the question, Kasminu bhagavo vignatam sarvamidam, kasminu bhagavo vignate sarvamidam vignatam bhavati iti. He approaches this teacher and he says, can you tell me that, oh sir, what that which is, you know, in knowing, everything else is as well known. So everything else is well known if I know this. So it's like, well, gosh golly, what would that be? Because what could possibly be something that encompasses all other knowledge? And so, of course, in the commentary and the way it's unfolded, it becomes abundantly clear that what is the thing that one wants to know, because in knowing it, it's not just something that is known, it is something that connects to you. It resonates, it has to resonate. If it's not resonating, it's not worth pursuing. So here it said, okay, that pursuit, that knowledge, which is all encompassing, which covers all your bases, is knowledge of the infinite. So knowledge of what is infinite as what is worth pursuing. All other forms of knowledge, not to take away from them, but they all come up short because they too have, you know, they're always about something else. Anything that begins in time that is part of subject to time and change is going to be limited, finite. Okay, so if that's the case, then they're not going to solve my problem, any of these other forms of knowledge. But this knowledge of the infinite, as unfolded in all of the Upanishads in various ways, that knowledge is what I want to address, because, and the beauty of it is that, you know, what's the resonance? How does it work? What does it do for me? Basically, again, you know, let's be practical here. What does it do for me? Because if it's not going to do anything, then I don't want to be bothered. So therefore, the idea is that in undertaking this study, and there's a whole methodology that unfolds, you know, it doesn't just say this is knowledge about the infinite. It has to also show you what is that infinite? Who is the one who is infinite? And where do you get it? Because you can't go to a corner store and pick it up. You know, actually you can get an infinity car, I want to say, but even that's limited. You get the point, that the idea is that if what I want is infinite, then all these other pursuits are going to give me something, not to dismiss them, but if this is what you want, then you have to go in for a pursuit or study of what is infinite. And in that pursuit, you also, it has to do something for you. So what does it do? It unfolds or presents to you exactly, you know, the point, the fact, irrefutable, and that's all of Shankara's, you know, commentaries are all about that. and that you are that one who is infinite. And understanding that you are what you seek, the one who is infinite, then you solve the problem of not, of thinking that I still need to get infinite from somewhere else. If you are infinite, it's already accomplished. And in that, it is in the line of wherever you go, there you are. So wherever you go, you are infinite. That one who is infinite just has to be recognized. Because the problem is we're all suffering from cases of mistaken identity. Identifying with what is finite, we lose sight. And therefore, all of the text, all of these texts in some way, shape, or form actually present or unfold what is infinite, showing in many ways how, the one who is the seeker of that is already that in fact, and just needs to understand it. But of course, we are all peculiar specimens. So we all have a lot of stuff, challenges in our minds. And, we come up with our own flavors of thinking. Gets very interesting, actually. And so with that, every which way to Sunday, this has to be addressed. That's why you have so many different texts in Upanishads and Prakarana Granthas. I mean, they're just amazing. Every single one of them brings you back to yourself in some way, shape, or form. And when it shows you that not infinite means what? Because some people can say, yeah, well, okay, so I'm infinite. So what is that? Again, I don't know what that looks like. What does it look like? How does it, how is it that I am this? And again, what does it do for me? It should leave me something. And more than just a warm, soft, fuzzy, but something that leaves me intrinsically with a sense of well-being. So when this is understood, then any text that you take is something where this is pointed out. And in the process, a lot of other things fall by the wayside. And Shankara has, again, if I had time, I could go on and on and on about this, but just to state that, he has ways of saying things that go one way and the other, because when you are presented with looking at it from different angles, then it really gives your mind a workout. And it resolves doubts in the process, because it's often said, oh, he's too analytical, it's too complicated, I don't have the brain power, or I don't have the time to do this. But yet it's actually very simple, like in that verse in chapter 9 of the Gita, where it describes it as susukam kartum, something that's easy to accomplish. It's easy to accomplish, and what else? It's pratyaksha avagamam. So it's something which is always immediate. It's not something that you have to go and do afterwards either. You who are seeking this is who you are. And with that, this is how it works. So these verses that draw upon all aspects of the human condition. Like, again, I'll just say this one and then I'll close and see if there are any questions. But the verses that relate to identification with the body. And of course, there are many all throughout. But, on the one hand, the body being something which is up close and personal to us, it's very difficult to disidentify with that. Same with the mind. And so, yet at the same time, there's analysis and unfolding that is done to help you recognize, A, that this body is definitely a gift. It is a blessing. It is something amazing. Yet at the same time, you appreciate that and make use of it. You don't abuse it, you make use of it. And yet at the same time, you don't get carried away with it either, because it's also like a depreciating asset. It's going down. And therefore, you don't want to put too much, emphasis or energy behind it, because it's backing a loser. And therefore, what I need then is you get the balance of perspective, all because these verses are saying it in so many, again, I could think of Nirvana Shatkam, Bhajagovindam, Viveka Chudamani, all of these different texts that hit on these aspects. And they say the same thing, but they're saying it in different ways. And with that, you gain so much. I mean, again, it's what's not to like with all of this, because every time you're really looking at yourself, it's all about you. And when you see yourself in this way, you are not excluding. It is not just you. It is, you are seeing everyone else at the same time. That's the beauty of it. So it encompasses everyone. That's the non-duality. Ekameva advitiyam. It is that non-duality that then allows a person to really do more. You can actually perform, not that you're looking for improvements per se, but you do a lot better when you have that objectivity. When you don't get so caught up in all of the, all of the aspects of your body and all the other pursuits that are related to that, you can put it in perspective. When you put it in perspective, then you do so much better with it. You're not buying into it. And at the same time, you are focusing on yourself as you really are, which is non-separate from everyone else. So it includes everyone else. And that makes you selfless. And so these, again, I mean, obviously the topic is endless. You could go on and on bringing in all these different examples. But I would say too that, it's something like, in terms of the programs and or uses for phones and computers, where you go to the app store to get an app, and the expression is, we have an app for that. Here, it's like, yeah, we have a verse for that. Whatever it is, whatever your challenge is, there's a verse that addresses it, that speaks to it. And again, it's not just, a blind sort of, well, just take it, repeat it, and you'll be fine. There's an unfolding there. There's a methodology. And that methodology is what makes you see what it is really all about. And when you see what it is really all about, again, you're always looking at yourself. And when you look at yourself like that, again, what's not to like? There is nothing that is lacking in you. It's just all because of the way in which we look at ourselves. And again, if I'm identifying suffering from that case of mistaken identity, where I'm looking at myself as somehow limited and finite, of course, I'm going to come up lacking. Something's going to be missing, because that's just how it is. So here, again, every text, every different facet that's there, it's the diamond with many facets. You're always looking at the same diamond. You're seeing it from all these different perspectives and covering all the bases. And with that, I'll just say one other thing. I know I said that before, but I'm going to say one other thing. And that is that pramana, that it is a pramana. And this is like uber critical to understand, because typically the word philosophy somehow gets mixed in with this. And, other people are going to call this philosophy. But as my teacher used to say, we're allergic to that word, because it diminishes it. People are not doing it, putting it down on purpose by using that word. It's just that really, when you think about it, it's a pramana. Pramana means a means of knowledge. Like your eyes are a means of knowledge for you to see. So your eyes are a means of knowledge for you to see. You don't call it a philosophy that your eyes see. In the same way, the words here are a means of knowledge to unfold a certain vision. And those words have to describe what it is all about. If they don't describe it, then they're the wrong words. That's a different story. But of course, Shankara, again, the emphasis was on using all the right words to make it abundantly clear, because so much can be unclear. And therefore, when recognizing that, as Swami Dayananda always used to say, that the words, we all know words are powerful. That's what communication is. And words can, you know, the sword, weapons can tyrannize for maybe a couple generations, but words can tyrannize for centuries. And they do. They really do. So this is where, you know, it's all about the words, using the right words, focusing on the words, because you ultimately, again, you really want to be abundantly clear. It's about you. So you want to be clear about who you really are and leave no stone unturned. And actually, it's a lot of fun. You know, what's not to, it's that adventure. There's an adventure in this self-study, self-pursuit. And it's just a question of finding, you know, how one can discover this through these texts and through whatever teachers you pursue or learn from. It's just the idea of, you know, it never gets old, and there's always something else that that is, it's like, yeah, I know, but yet it's so cool. Nifty cool, in fact, when you can discover certain things that maybe you never thought about, but it's still revealing all the time. And, you know, that's Shankara. But for Shankara, none of this would be possible. And of course, I can sit here and say I am eternally grateful, because I benefit by this every day, all day, every day. And, you know, again, I could go on, but I want to make sure we stay on track here. And so I will take any questions if there are any. I guess I have to look at the chat and see if there are. And if there are not, then I can say maybe one or two other things.
There is a question, Jananiji, which says, what aspects of our every experience should we hold on to keep our minds fixed on the ultimate reality?
Well, that's a loaded question.
I know you were giving these fabulous music references and you have this very serious question. Nothing on Cat Stevens. I used to listen to him too.
So, okay, again, what aspects of our every experience should we hold on to keep our, okay, you don't actually need to hold on to any experiences in a sense, because those experiences are with you. You know, they get sometimes, in fact, experiences, they take hold in spite of yourself. You know, some experiences you want to forget, you want to, you know, push aside, and yet you can't, because they get embedded. And so experience is something, of course, it's a wonderful teacher, we know this, and we use experience to help us understand things. But, you know, knowledge is, you know, the order is Shastra, Shruti, then the unfolding, and then Yukti, through Yukti, and finally Anubhava. So Anubhava is, experience is something that you see it and you make use of it. You can learn from it. So you don't have to hold on to it, but you can learn from it, process, and yet at the same time, you have to stay in motion as well, because otherwise it'll pull you down. It becomes an obstacle. So I hope that answered the question.
I also loved what you said about the eyes not being a philosophy, the focus on pramana. You know, yes. If you can touch a little more on that, I think, because that's what differentiates what both Swamiji Gurudev and Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji emphasized on. So
yes, okay, sure. I mean, I could again go on and on about that, but pramana, you know, it's words, and it can get really trippy, because words can have so many different meanings, and so depending on. I'm currently sitting in on with a Rig Vedic scholar to kind of get a grip on Rig Veda, because I mean, again, you can spend the whole day just doing this stuff, but but the idea is that the way the words are formed, even the sounds, have impact. And so if you recognize that these words, if you don't put the words together in the right way, then the wrong impression will be there. My dad, I mean, we used to tease my dad about being an over analytical engineer. And he finally, you know, at one point got tired of all that. And he said, just remember that all it took was the malfunction of one O-ring to blow up a shuttle. And it's like, okay. So the point is, something so small can have such an impact. And of course, here we're not talking about anything blowing up, but in a way, it's like the wrong word going in there and you know, mingling or creating an impression can lead you off track and keep you going in an entirely different direction, which can be ultimately quite devastating. And of course, you know, when a lot of people, you're using words that are destructive, we see the power of that. So this is why, you know, you can never say enough about how paying attention to the ways the words are used and why you would say one thing and not say something else. This is again Shankara and that analysis, because the more you see, because your mind is you're wrapping your mind around everything that is being said, you know, and when your mind wraps around it, it wants to say, ah, yeah, that's good. Ah, yeah, that works. You know, it's like it should leave you ultimately feeling like you're all tucked in. Life is another way to say that you're all tucked in, you're good to go. And so the words, if they get misused or abused, they will not do that. So
True.
You know,
Yeah.
that's
So to touch on something else that you said about having preconceived notions when you met Puja Swamiji or even Gurudev Ji, could you just explain or elaborate that a little bit? Because I think that's also relevant to today's times that you've been very fabulously talking about. So what are those preconceived notions, whether in the West or even in India, that we fight against? And, you know, in terms of like, why should I study, or why with a guru, or something of your own personal, you know, notions that you had were broken?
Two of them. One is with Chinmayananda, it was like having to even study, because you know, why should I study? Because that's all just intellectual stuff, you know, and so it goes against being really spiritual, if you will, if you get too you know, scholastic in your approach. So, and you know, of course, he had many great expressions, but you know, he would basically say something to the effect of, and nothing is jumping out immediately at this moment, but you know, it's like, okay, you know, you want to jump off the cliff, basically jump off the cliff. You know, it's no skin on my, because it's the idea of you're missing. If you don't have, you know, everything that we do comes from the way we think, everything. So if I think a certain way, and that way has got some kind of defects or disconnect, then I'm the person that pays the price for that. I'm the one that suffers as a result. And so therefore, and this is what he would say, it's like you really have to know, in order to know what all that is there, see it clearly. It's clear. It's something like wearing glasses that are, you know, too blurry, that block your vision as opposed to seeing. That was what he would say along those lines. And Dayananda would be like, you know, because of a notion of duality. I had never heard of non-duality, you know, totally clueless about non-duality. So I like my duality. It worked for me.
The music parts for sure.
Yeah. So yes, it was cool. And so it's that thing of, oh no, I have to think some more. You know, I don't want to think.
So is there any song in recent times that, you know, like how the others were triggers to you, that you've mentioned such wonderful songs, and it takes me back to my younger days?
Yeah.
Is there anything now that you think, you know, has triggered you and that's evocate?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't so recent. Actually, there's a lot of good songs out there even now that hit it. They, you know, they touch on something and they get That's why I call them triggers. They get somebody's attention.
Mhm.
And if the person is really paying attention, it'll not just resonate, it'll get them moving in a certain direction. But there's that song from the late 80s, no, late 70s, from Kansas, Dust in the Wind. You know, close my eyes, only for a moment, and the moment's gone. All my dreams flash before my eyes, a curiosity. Dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. Everything is dust in the wind. Don't hang on. Nothing lasts forever but the earth and sky. It slips away. And all your money won't another minute buy. Dust in the wind. Everything is dust in the wind. So
Oh, that's so lovely, Jananiji. Love it, love it. Wish we could have had you for a music session, perhaps, but I'm sorry that we'll have to let you go.
That's fantastic,
Thank you so much. Oh, Hariji is here.
No, I just, you know, I'm doing a session next week on non-dualism and contemporary art. So I sort of see Advaita everywhere in art, and so I'm just doing a chat on that. So I really like the way you pick up these nuggets from, I mean, when you quoted Mick Jagger and Jethro,
Yeah.
really tough. There's so much beauty in you know, figuring out when you have that lens, when you have that Vedantic lens, and then you see art, then suddenly you see only Vedanta in art. So I really like that, what you're doing. And I don't know, I mean, how do you stay connected to the current current pop culture? You seem to be, the way you just reached out, you seem to be connected to the current pop culture, because you can have a past connection and then migrate to Vedanta and become a very serious student. And then you disconnect yourself and you just engross in this. Then you are living both worlds, and you're enjoying and you're using the phraseology from the current world. So I really like that. How do you do that?
It's just being exposed to, I have, you know, relatives who are younger and or just being around in terms of, you know, the way people are thinking. And there are some really good songs out there now, even. It's just that they don't necessarily stay with me. I hear them and I say, oh, that's great. And you know, The Satisfied Mind, I don't know if you ever heard that song. That's an incredible song, but that's like right on point. Because it's all talk, it's all the same thing. It's pointing out that there are limitations in everything, and that, you know, there is a solution to the limitation. And it's a question of seeing that. And for me, I don't have, it's not an effort to answer your question. It's not an effort to really do it. It's simply, you know, you just find yourself in the setup. And in that setup, you see what's there that's valid. And then, you know, make use of it and try to make it relevant. Again, it's relevant to see how, show the connection. And that's what I do with my classes is, you know, try to help people, because you take the things that they're experiencing. That's where experience is very helpful. You take what they experience and then you move it, you know, up a notch, so to speak, so that they can see and really, you know, get it if they're paying attention, which they do. So that's how it works.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And I'll just do a closing chant if we're finished here. Okay. And I did see some chats and I appreciate them, and thank you, everybody. It was an honor, and I'm happy that I could do this.
We love this. Thank you.
Great. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Jananiji.
All the
That's
best.
wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, good.
Hope to have
Good.
you back on Advaita Academy some other time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'll be back. Take
Thank you.
care. Yeah. Oh.
Om.